The bookstore smelled like fresh paint and possibility when Mara Bennett turned the key in the lock for the first time, her hands trembling not from fear, but from pure anticipation that had been building inside her chest for 6 months straight. She had spent 3 years working at a corporate publishing house in Chicago, sitting in meetings about profit margins and market demographics, watching the joy of literature get reduced to numbers on spreadsheets. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when her boss suggested they pass on a beautiful debut novel because the author did not have enough social media followers. Mara had walked out that afternoon, packed her apartment within 2 weeks, and driven 14 hours to Maple Falls, Vermont, a town of barely 3,000 people that she had visited once as a teenager and never forgotten. The building she purchased sat on Main Street between a coffee shop and a flower store, with large windows that let in the morning sun and exposed brick walls that made her heart sing every time she walked inside. She had poured her entire savings into this dream, along with a small inheritance from her grandmother, who always told her that a life spent doing what you love was the only life worth living. "Need help with those boxes?" a voice called from the doorway. Mara turned to see an older woman with silver hair pulled into a practical bun, wearing a cardigan despite the warm September afternoon. This was Dorothy, owner of the flower shop next door, who had already brought over cookies twice in the past week. "I think I can manage, but thank you," Mara said, brushing dust off her jeans. "Town is excited about having a bookstore again," Dorothy said, stepping inside and looking around with approval. "The last one closed 15 years ago when the owner retired. We have been starved for good reading material ever since." They chatted for a few minutes about the town, about the upcoming fall festival, about how the tourists would start arriving soon to see the leaves change. Dorothy mentioned the bed and breakfasts filling up, the restaurants preparing for their busiest season, the hiking trails that brought people from all over New England. After Dorothy left, Mara spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes of books, running her fingers over spines, arranging titles by genre, and then rearranging them because the flow did not feel quite right. She created a cozy reading nook in the corner with a worn leather armchair and a standing lamp. She set up a children's section with a circular rug and small cushions. She made a display table near the entrance for new releases and local authors. The official opening was set for the following Saturday, which gave her 5 days to finish preparations, spread the word, and try not to panic about whether anyone would actually show up. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and a crispness in the air that promised autumn was settling in for good. Mara wore a blue dress and brown boots, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup, because she had never been good at applying it anyway. She unlocked the door at 9 o'clock sharp, flipped the sign to open, and waited. The first customer arrived at 9:15, then another at 9:30. By 10 o'clock, she had a steady stream of locals browsing the shelves, expressing delight at having a bookstore again, asking if she would consider starting a book club. Mara rang up sales and made recommendations, and felt something warm and solid settling in her chest that felt remarkably like belonging. She was helping a young mother find picture books for her daughter when the bell above the door chimed, and a man walked in who made her lose her train of thought mid-sentence. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he had run his hands through it a few times and broad shoulders filling out a simple gray Henley. But it was his face that caught her attention. Strong jawline with a day or two of stubble, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, an intensity about him that felt almost out of place in the relaxed atmosphere of her bookstore. "Sorry, what was I saying?" Mara asked, turning back to the mother. "You were suggesting that book about the mouse," the woman said with an understanding smile. Mara finished helping her, wrapped up the books in brown paper tied with twine, and then found her eyes drifting back to the man who was now standing in the fiction section, his head tilted as he read the spines. She walked over, reminding herself that customer service was part of the job, and she was not approaching him because he was attractive. Definitely not. "Can I help you find something?" He turned, and up close she could see his eyes were actually a very dark brown, almost black, and there were faint lines at the corners that suggested he was somewhere in his early 30s. "Just browsing," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice that made you think he was used to being listened to. "I did not know there was a bookstore here. It just opened today, actually, about an hour ago. That explains it." He pulled a book from the shelf, examined the cover, slid it back. "I have been coming to Maple Falls for years, and it has always been missing a good bookstore." "Well, I hope to fix that problem," Mara said. "Are you visiting? Taking some time off?" "I have a cabin rental up near the lake." "The lake is beautiful this time of year," she said, and then felt awkward because that sounded like something from a tourism brochure. But he smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look less intense and more human. "It is very peaceful." They stood there for a moment, and Mara realized she should probably return to the register since other customers were browsing, but something about his presence held her in place. "I am Mara, by the way, owner of this establishment." "James," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, warm, professional. She pulled away and gave him what she hoped was a normal smile, before excusing herself to help another customer. James stayed for 40 minutes, browsing methodically through different sections, finally settling on 3 books: a literary thriller, a collection of essays, and a thick fantasy novel that Mara loved. "Good choice on that one," she said as she rang him up. "I have read it twice." "High praise. What made it worth a second read?" "The characters," she said without hesitation. "The plot is great, but it is really the characters that stay with you. They feel real, flawed, trying their best in impossible situations." "Sounds like life," James said. "The best books usually are." She wrapped his purchases and handed them over, and when their fingers brushed, she felt something electric that she immediately told herself she was imagining. "I am sure I will be back," James said. "It looks like I am going to need more books than I brought with me." "We will be here," Mara said. She watched him leave, then forced herself to focus on the steady stream of customers that kept her busy until late afternoon. By the time she flipped the sign to closed at 6 o'clock, she had sold more books than she had dared hope for a first day, and her feet ached in the best possible way. Dorothy appeared at the door with a bottle of wine and Thai takeout. "I figured you would be too tired to cook," Dorothy said, letting herself in. They sat in the reading nook, eating pad Thai out of containers and drinking wine from coffee mugs because Mara had not unpacked her real glasses yet. "So," Dorothy said with a knowing look, "I saw James Morrison come in today. The man who bought 3 books. Tall, dark, handsome, looks like he stepped out of a cologne advertisement." "That is one way to describe him," Mara said, fighting a smile. "He has been renting the Patterson cabin every autumn for the past 5 years. Comes alone, keeps to himself mostly, very polite but private. Nobody knows much about him except that he always stays for exactly 2 weeks and tips very generously at the restaurants." "Mysterious," Mara said, taking a sip of wine. You are interested, Dorothy said, not making it a question. I am interested in all my customers, Mara replied primly. Dorothy laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Of course you are, dear. James came back on Monday afternoon, returning the thriller because he had finished it in one sitting and needed something else. Mara recommended 2 more titles, and they ended up talking for 20 minutes about books, about what made a good mystery versus a great one, about the importance of pacing and the disappointment of a weak ending. You really know your stuff, James said, leaning against the counter in a way that seemed unconscious, comfortable. I worked in publishing for a few years. Read a lot of manuscripts, attended a lot of pitch meetings. You develop strong opinions. What made you leave? The question was casual, but Mara felt the weight of it. I got tired of treating books like products instead of art, and I wanted to build something of my own, something that mattered. James nodded slowly, and something in his expression made her think he understood more than she had said. That takes courage, he said, or stupidity. I have invested everything in this place. I do not think it is stupid. She met his eyes, saw sincerity there, and felt her chest tighten in a way that was both alarming and thrilling. He came in again on Wednesday, this time in the morning, wearing running clothes and slightly out of breath. Sorry, I just finished a run and saw you were open, he said. I probably should not touch anything while I am sweaty. Mara laughed. I promise the books can handle it, looking for something specific. Actually, I wanted to ask your advice. My mother's birthday is coming up, and she loves historical fiction. Any suggestions? They spent 15 minutes discussing options, and Mara learned that his mother was a retired teacher who had a particular fondness for World War II-era stories, but was tired of the same perspectives. Mara recommended a newer title told from the viewpoint of a female Russian pilot, and James bought it immediately along with 2 other books for himself. Do you always buy this many books? Mara asked as she wrapped them. I am on vacation, not much else to do except read and think. Most people who vacation in Maple Falls are here for the hiking and the leaf peeping. I have done plenty of both. But sometimes it is nice to just be still, you know. No agenda, no schedule, no one needing anything from me. There was something in the way he said it that made Mara think his normal life was the exact opposite, full of agendas and schedules and people needing things. She wanted to ask what he did for work, but it felt too intrusive, too much like prying. Instead she said, Well, I am glad you are spending some of your stillness here. Me too, he said, and the look he gave her made her skin warm. After he left, Mara found herself thinking about him more than was probably appropriate for someone she barely knew. She thought about the way he moved, confident but not arrogant. The way he listened when she talked about books, really listened, asking follow-up questions that showed he was paying attention. The way his whole face changed when he smiled, like the sun breaking through clouds. She was still thinking about him on Friday evening when she closed up shop and found him waiting outside, hands in the pockets of a dark jacket. Hi, she said, surprised. Did you need something? I wanted to ask if you would have dinner with me, James said, direct and to the point. There is a restaurant Dorothy recommended, something about the best maple-glazed salmon in Vermont. Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. That would be the Harvest Table. Is that a yes? She should probably say no. She had known him for less than a week. She was trying to establish a business, and she did not need distractions. She had promised herself she would focus on the bookstore and nothing else for at least 6 months. Yes, she said. That is a yes. The harvest table occupied a converted farmhouse 2 miles outside town, all rustic wood beams and candlelight and windows overlooking a meadow. James had made a reservation, which impressed her because the place was notoriously hard to get into during peak season. They sat at a corner table, and Mara ordered the salmon while James got the venison. They shared a bottle of red wine that the waiter promised was excellent, and they talked about everything and nothing. She learned that James grew up in Boston, the oldest of 3 siblings. That he had always been driven, always focused on success in a way that made sense when you grew up with not much money and a lot to prove. That he loved sailing but rarely had time for it anymore. That he had read The Count of Monte Cristo when he was 15, and it had changed his life. "That is a serious book for a 15-year-old, Mara said. "I was a serious 15-year-old, James replied with a self-deprecating smile. "I wanted to understand revenge and justice and redemption. That book showed me how complicated all 3 could be." "And did it give you answers?" "It gave me better questions." Mara told him about growing up in Ohio with parents who were both teachers and a younger brother, who was now a physical therapist in California. About discovering books as a lonely middle schooler and never looking back. About her grandmother who raised chickens and made the best peach pie and left her just enough money to take this leap. "She sounds wonderful," James said. "She was. She died 2 years ago, and I still find myself wanting to call her and tell her things. I am sorry. Thank you. But I think she would love what I am doing now. She always said life was too short for regrets." The food was incredible, and the conversation flowed easily, naturally, like they had known each other for months instead of days. James was attentive without being overbearing, funny in a dry way that surprised her, thoughtful in his responses. He asked about her plans for the bookstore, about whether she wanted to expand into selling gifts or coffee, about how the community had responded. "Better than I expected," Mara said. "I think people are genuinely excited to have a bookstore again, and Dorothy has been spreading the word like it is her personal mission. Dorothy is a force of nature. You know her. I buy flowers from her every time I am in town. She always asks me questions like she is conducting an interview." Mara laughed. "That sounds like Dorothy." After dinner, James drove her back to her apartment above the bookstore. He walked her to her door, and they stood in the small hallway with terrible lighting and chipped paint that Mara kept meaning to fix. "I had a really good time tonight," she said. "So did I," James said. "Can I take you out again? You are only here for another week, right?" Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to read. "About that. I was thinking of extending my stay." "Oh, I like it here. It is peaceful, and the company has been unexpectedly excellent." Mara felt her pulse kick up. "How long are you thinking?" "I am not sure yet. Maybe another week or 2. I can work remotely for a while if I need to." "What do you do for work?" James hesitated, and Mara saw him weighing something in his mind. "I run a company. Manufacturing, mostly. Industrial equipment, nothing very exciting." It was the first time he had mentioned his work, and Mara got the sense he was downplaying it significantly. But she did not push. "Well, I would like to see you again," she said, "while you are here." "Tomorrow?" James asked. "I could help you at the bookstore if you need it, or we could do something else." "Whatever you want. You want to spend your vacation working at a bookstore. I want to spend my vacation with you," James said simply. And then he kissed her, soft and careful, his hand coming up to cup her jaw. Mara felt her entire body light up, every nerve ending suddenly awake and paying attention. She kissed him back, fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket, and when they pulled apart she was breathless. "Tomorrow, then," she managed to say. James showed up at the bookstore at 10 o'clock the next morning with coffee and pastries from the bakery down the street. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, and Mara tried not to stare at how unfairly attractive he looked doing absolutely nothing. "Put me to work," he said. She gave him tasks, reorganizing the history section, helping customers, moving boxes from the storage room. James approached everything with quiet competence, and Mara noticed how good he was with people, patient and helpful without being condescending. An elderly man spent 20 minutes talking his ear off about World War II, and James listened attentively, asked questions, treated the man's stories with respect. During a lull in customers, they sat in the reading nook with coffee. "You are good at this," Mara said. "At what?" "Helping, listening, making people feel heard." James looked uncomfortable with the compliment. "I think people just want someone to pay attention. Most people are too distracted or busy to do that." "I used to be one of those people," James admitted. "Always rushing, always focused on the next thing instead of the present moment. Coming here has reminded me what I was missing." "What were you missing?" "Connection, I guess. Real conversation, quiet, the feeling that time is not always running out." Mara wanted to ask what his life was like back home, what kind of company he ran that made him feel like time was always running out. But a group of tourists came in, and the moment passed. They fell into a rhythm over the next week. James would come by the bookstore most days, sometimes helping out, sometimes just reading in the corner and providing pleasant company. They had dinner together 3 more times, tried the Italian place and the farm-to-table restaurant, and ordered pizza to eat on the floor of Mara's apartment while watching an old movie on her laptop. They talked constantly, about books and music and politics and philosophy, and their families and their fears and their dreams. James opened up slowly, carefully, but Mara learned that he had worked brutal hours for years to build his company. That success had come at the cost of relationships and personal time, that he was questioning whether it had been worth it. "Do you like what you do?" Mara asked one evening as they walked along the lake shore, the sun setting in shades of orange and pink. "I used to, I think. Or maybe I just liked winning, liked building something from nothing and watching it grow. But not anymore." James picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. "I do not know. For the past few years, it has felt like I am on autopilot, going through the motions because that is what I am supposed to do, because people depend on me, because stopping feels impossible." "Nothing is impossible," says the woman who left her publishing job and opened a bookstore in a town where she barely knew anyone. "Exactly. If I can do something that terrifying, you can figure out what you actually want from life." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "I think I am starting to figure that out." He kissed her then, thorough and demanding, and Mara forgot about the cold and the fact that they were technically in public. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I do not want to leave," he said quietly, "so do not leave. It is not that simple." "Why not?" James pulled back, conflicted. "I have responsibilities, a company to run, people who work for me, commitments I have made. And you cannot do any of that from here. Some of it, but not all. And eventually, I would need to go back, at least for a while." Mara felt her heart sink but forced herself to be reasonable. They had known each other for less than 2 weeks. This was probably just a vacation romance, intense and wonderful and completely unsustainable in the real world. "Let's not think about it tonight," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. You are here now. Let's just enjoy that. But the conversation had planted a seed of anxiety that Mara could not quite shake. She found herself watching James more carefully, looking for signs that he was pulling away, preparing to leave. He seemed distracted sometimes, checking his phone with a furrowed brow, taking calls outside where she could not hear. One afternoon, while he was at the bookstore, his phone rang and he stepped outside to answer it. Mara tried not to eavesdrop, but she could hear his voice through the window, sharp and authoritative in a way she had never heard before. I told you to handle it. No, that is not acceptable. I do not care what they want. We have a contract. Figure it out, Marcus. That is what I pay you for. He came back inside looking tense, jaw tight. Everything okay? Mara asked. Work stuff. Nothing important. But it clearly was important, and Mara felt the distance between them yawn wider. That evening, Dorothy cornered her while she was closing up. So things are getting serious with James, Dorothy said. I would not say serious. We are just spending time together. Honey, that man looks at you like you hung the moon. And you light up every time he walks in the room. That is not just spending time together. Mara sighed. He is leaving soon, back to his real life. This is just a vacation thing. Have you asked him about that? Sort of. He said he has responsibilities, that it is complicated. Dorothy made a thoughtful noise. You know what I think? I think James Morrison has spent so long taking care of everyone else that he has forgotten how to let himself be happy. I cannot fix that for him. No, but you can show him what he would be missing if he left. Mara thought about that conversation over the next few days. She decided to stop worrying about the future and focus on the present, on enjoying whatever time she had with James. They went hiking through the mountains, the trees ablaze with fall colors. They attended the town's autumn festival, where James won her a stuffed bear at the ring toss, and they ate caramel apples until their teeth hurt. They spent an entire rainy Sunday in Mara's apartment, reading and talking and kissing until she felt drunk on him. I have not been this happy in years, James admitted one night as they lay tangled together on her couch. Maybe ever. Me too, Mara said, tracing patterns on his chest. I need to tell you something. Her heart clenched. Okay. James sat up, running a hand through his hair in that gesture she had come to recognize as nervous. I have not been completely honest with you about my work. What do you mean? When I said I run a company, I made it sound smaller than it is. The truth is, it is pretty big. We do over 200 million in revenue annually. I have about 800 employees across 3 states. Mara blinked. Oh, I should have told you sooner. I just liked that you did not know, that you treated me like a regular person instead of a CEO or a potential business connection or someone who could be useful to you. I do not care how much money you make, Mara said slowly, but I care that you were not honest. I know. I am sorry. I just needed a break from being James Morrison, CEO. I wanted to be just James for a while. She could understand that, even if it stung a little. What else have you not told me? Nothing important. Everything else has been completely real, completely honest. My feelings for you are real, Mara. She searched his face and saw only sincerity. Okay. 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 I understand why you did not tell me. And $200 million explains the nice watch and the ability to extend your vacation indefinitely. James laughed, relieved. The watch was a gift from my board when we hit our first 100 million. I do not even like it that much, but everyone expects me to wear it. What kind of industrial equipment do you manufacture? Specialized machinery for food processing plants. Very boring, very technical. We have a few patents that make us competitive, and we have built a reputation for reliability and innovation." That does not sound boring. That sounds impressive. It is not opening a bookstore in a small town impressive. Different kinds of impressive, Mara said, kissing him. They spent the rest of the night talking about his business, about the pressures and the challenges and the rewards. Mara understood better now why he had seemed so desperate for peace, for stillness, for a life that was not constantly demanding his attention. "Do you have to go back soon?" she asked, dreading the answer. "I have been putting it off, but yes, there is a board meeting in 2 weeks that I really cannot miss. And some issues with one of our facilities that need my attention." 2 weeks. Mara felt her chest tighten but forced herself to nod. "Okay. Come with me," James said suddenly. "What?" "Come back to Boston with me. You could stay for a week, meet my family, see where I live, and then we could figure out what comes next." "James, I just opened my bookstore. I cannot leave for a week. Could you close for a few days, or hire someone to cover?" Mara thought about it. The bookstore was doing well, steady business from locals and tourists. Dorothy had already offered to help if Mara ever needed it, and Maple Falls was a small town where people looked out for each other. "Maybe," she said. "Let me think about it." But the truth was, she was terrified. Terrified of meeting his family, of seeing his life in Boston, of discovering that she did not fit into his world the way he fit into hers. Here in Maple Falls, they existed in a bubble where he was just James, and she was just Mara, and the outside world did not matter. In Boston, he would be James Morrison, CEO, with responsibilities and expectations and a life that had nothing to do with her. She talked it over with Dorothy the next day while unpacking a shipment of new releases. "You should go," Dorothy said firmly. "What if I do not belong there? What if his life is too different and we realize this was just a vacation romance? And what if you do not go and you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been?" Mara groaned. "Why does this have to be so complicated?" "Because anything worth having usually is. But that man is head over heels for you, and unless I am completely blind, you feel the same way about him." "I do," Mara admitted. "It scares me how much I already care about him." "Then go to Boston, see his life. Let him see more of yours. If it is meant to work out, it will." That evening, Mara told James she would come with him. The relief and joy on his face made her decision feel right, even with all her doubts. They spent James's remaining time in Maple Falls soaking up every moment. He helped her paint the storage room. They cooked dinner together in her tiny kitchen, bumping into each other and laughing. They took long drives through the countryside, stopping at farm stands and antique shops and scenic overlooks. The night before they were supposed to leave for Boston, Mara could not sleep. She lay in James's arms, listening to his steady breathing, and wondered if she was making a huge mistake. "I can hear you thinking," James murmured, not opening his eyes. "Sorry. What is wrong?" "Just nervous about tomorrow." James opened his eyes then, rolling to face her. "Talk to me. What if your family does not like me? What if I do not fit into your life? What if we get to Boston and realize this only worked because we were in a bubble? First, my family will love you because I love you and they want me to be happy. Second, you will fit into my life because I will make space for you, because you are more important than any business meeting or board dinner. And third, this is not a bubble. What we have is real, and it will work in Boston the same way it works here." Mara's breath caught. "You love me," James smiled. "I love you. I have been trying to find the right time to say it, but apparently 3 in the morning while you are panicking is that time." "I love you too," Mara said, the words feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. I did not mean to fall this hard this fast. Me neither. But here we are." He kissed her slowly, sweetly, and Mara let herself believe that maybe Dorothy was right. Maybe this would work out after all. They left for Boston the next morning in James's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Mara's entire inventory. The drive took about 3 hours, and they spent it listening to music and talking and holding hands across the center console. Boston was overwhelming after weeks in Maple Falls. So many people, so much noise, buildings towering overhead and traffic that made Mara tense. James navigated it all with ease, pulling up eventually to a modern high-rise in an obviously expensive neighborhood. "This is home," he said, pulling into an underground parking garage. His apartment was on the 23rd floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek furniture and artwork that probably cost more than Mara's car. It was beautiful and sophisticated and felt absolutely nothing like him. "I know," James said, reading her expression. "It is not exactly warm and cozy. It is just different from what I expected. I bought it 5 years ago because my realtor said it was a good investment. I barely spend time here honestly. I am usually at the office." He gave her a tour, and Mara tried to imagine James living here, eating breakfast at the marble countertops, sleeping in the massive bed with its expensive linens. It felt sterile, lonely, and her heart ached for him. That evening, James took her to dinner at a restaurant where everyone seemed to know him. They were seated immediately. The wine list was brought without asking. The chef came out to say hello personally. Mara felt out of place in her simple dress, aware of the designer handbags and expensive jewelry surrounding them. "You okay?" James asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Just adjusting. Your world is very different from mine. I know, but you are handling it beautifully." The next day, James had to go into the office for a few hours. He apologized profusely, but Mara assured him she would be fine exploring the city on her own. She walked through Boston Common, visited a few bookstores, grabbed lunch at a small cafe. It was nice, but by the afternoon she found herself missing Maple Falls, missing the quiet streets and familiar faces and the simplicity of her bookstore. That evening, she met James's family at his mother's house in the suburbs. His mother, Catherine, was warm and welcoming, immediately pulling Mara into a hug. His father, Robert, was more reserved but friendly. His sister, Emma, was hilarious, peppering Mara with questions and embarrassing stories about James. His brother, David, was quiet but kind, clearly protective of his older brother. They all gathered around the dinner table, and Mara relaxed as the conversation flowed. Catherine told stories about James as a serious child who organized his toys by color and read encyclopedias for fun. Emma talked about how James had worked 2 jobs to help pay for her college tuition. David mentioned how James had given him seed money to start his own business. "He does not talk about any of this," Mara said. "That is because our brother is allergic to accepting credit for anything good he does," Emma said, nudging James. "I just help when I can," James said, uncomfortable with the attention. After dinner, Catherine pulled Mara aside while they were doing dishes. "I have not seen him this happy in years," she said quietly. "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." "I am not doing anything special," Mara said. "You are being yourself, and that is exactly what he needs. James has spent so long being what everyone else needs him to be. His father wanted him to be successful, so he built a company. His siblings needed support, so he provided it. His employees need leadership, so he gives it. But with you, I think he finally gets to just be James." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. I do not know if I can fit into his life here. It is so different from mine. Then maybe his life needs to change, Catherine said simply. They stayed in Boston for 4 more days. Mara met James's best friend from college, toured his office building where employees clearly respected and liked him, attended a charity gala where James was honored for his philanthropy. She saw him in his element, commanding and confident, and she understood better the weight he carried. But she also saw the toll it took, the late-night emails he felt obligated to answer, the phone calls that interrupted their dinners, the tension in his shoulders that only seemed to ease when they were alone together. On their last night in Boston, they went to the harbor and walked along the water. "What are you thinking?" James asked. "I am thinking that I understand now why you needed to get away. It is not always this intense, but it can be overwhelming. Do you want to come back to Maple Falls with me?" James stopped walking. "What? Come back with me. Stay for a while longer. You said you can work remotely for some things, and maybe being away from all this would help you figure out what you really want." "I already know what I want," James said. "I want you." "Then come back with me." James looked torn. "I have meetings next week, and the board is already annoyed that I have been away so much. You are the CEO. You are allowed to take time for yourself." "It is not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. You are making it complicated." They argued, not loudly but intensely, about responsibility and priorities and what mattered most. It was their first real fight, and it ended with James saying he needed to think and Mara storming back to the apartment ahead of him. She was packing her bag when he came in an hour later. "I called Marcus," he said. Marcus was his COO, the man who had been handling things while James was away. "I told him I am taking a leave of absence." Mara turned to stare at him. "What?" "A leave of absence. 3 months starting now. He thinks I am crazy, but I do not care. You are right. I have been letting this company run my life for too long, and I am tired of it." "James, I did not mean for you to quit." "I am not quitting. I am stepping back, delegating, trusting the team I have built to handle things without me hovering over every decision. And I am going back to Maple Falls with you because that is where I want to be." Mara crossed the room and kissed him. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." They drove back to Maple Falls the next morning, and when they crossed into Vermont, Mara felt something in her chest ease. By the time they reached town and she saw her bookstore on Main Street, she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Welcome home," she said to James as they parked. "Yeah," he said, looking around at the quiet street and the mountains in the distance and the life that was so different from what he had left behind. Home. James settled into Maple Falls like he had been there forever. He rented a small house on the edge of town with a view of the mountains and space for a home office. He set up video calls and remote systems so he could stay connected to the company without being consumed by it. And he spent his days splitting time between working and being with Mara. He became a regular fixture at the bookstore, helping with inventory and recommendations, and the book club Mara had started that met every Thursday evening. The town accepted him easily, no longer seeing him as a tourist, but as someone who belonged. Dorothy declared herself personally responsible for their relationship, and took every opportunity to remind them that she had known they were perfect for each other from the beginning. "I saw it the first day he walked into your store," she told Mara one afternoon. "The way he looked at you, like you were the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life." Mara had never been happier. She woke up next to James most mornings, the two of them having fallen into an easy rhythm of domesticity. They cooked together, read together, took long walks through the changing season as autumn deepened into winter. The bookstore thrived. Mara expanded the children's section and started hosting author events. She partnered with local schools for literacy programs and created a lending library for families who could not afford to buy books. James helped with the business side, offering advice on inventory management and marketing strategies, always careful to support rather than take over. In December, James had to return to Boston for a week for the board meeting he had postponed twice already. Mara stayed in Maple Falls to manage the holiday rush at the bookstore, and they talked every night, sometimes for hours. "I miss you," James said on the third night. "My apartment feels even more empty than usual." "I miss you too, but you will be back soon." "Actually, I have been thinking, what if I sold this place?" "I do not need an apartment in Boston if I am living in Maple Falls." Mara's heart skipped. "You are really staying?" "I am really staying. My 3 months are almost up, but I have been talking to Marcus about making this arrangement permanent. He would take over day-to-day operations as CEO. I would stay on as chairman of the board, focusing on long-term strategy and major decisions. I could do most of it remotely, come to Boston once a month for meetings. Is that what you want? What I want is a life that makes me happy. And I am happier in Maple Falls with you than I have ever been anywhere else." When James returned, he brought his mother with him. Catherine wanted to see the town that had stolen her son's heart, and Mara was nervous until the older woman walked into the bookstore and immediately started exclaiming over everything. "This is wonderful," Catherine said, running her hands over the spines of books. "James said it was special, but I did not imagine anything this lovely." They had dinner at the harvest table, and Catherine told Mara stories about raising 3 children while teaching full-time, about the sacrifices and joys of motherhood, about watching James transform from a serious boy into an even more serious man. "He smiles now," Catherine said. "Really smiles, not just the polite version he uses for business. You have given him that." "He has given me a lot too," Mara said. "I was so focused on building the bookstore that I was not looking for a relationship. But then he walked in and everything changed." "The best things usually happen when we are not looking for them," Catherine said wisely. In January, James officially made the changes to his company, stepping back from the CEO position and into a chairman role. There was a press release and some articles in business journals, speculation about why a successful CEO would give up control, but James did not care what anyone thought. "I am not giving up anything," he told Mara. "I am choosing what matters most." In February, James asked Mara to move in with him. His house was bigger than her apartment, with space for her books and a real kitchen and a porch where they could drink coffee and watch the sunrise. "Are you sure?" Mara asked. "We have only been together for 5 months. I have never been more sure of anything, but if you need more time, I can wait." Mara thought about it for approximately 10 seconds before saying yes. They merged their lives, their routines, their dreams. Mara's clothes filled half the closet. Her books lined the shelves James built specifically for her. They adopted a dog from the local shelter, a golden retriever mix named Scout who loved everyone and had no sense of personal space. Spring came to Maple Falls with mud and rain and the slow greening of the world. The bookstore had its 1-year anniversary, and Mara threw a party with cake and champagne and speeches about community and literature and following your dreams. James stood in the back, watching her glow with pride and happiness, and knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life making her this happy. He had been planning the proposal for weeks, trying to figure out the perfect moment. He considered elaborate gestures, fancy restaurants, romantic getaways. But in the end, he realized the perfect moment was not something he needed to create. It was something he just needed to recognize. It happened on a Tuesday evening in May. They were at the bookstore after closing, sitting in the reading nook with Scout sprawled across both their feet. Mara was reading aloud from a new novel she loved, her voice animated as she did different voices for the characters. The setting sun streamed through the windows, turning everything golden. James watched her, memorizing this moment, the pure joy on her face as she read, the way her hair fell across her shoulder, the unconscious way she reached over to touch his hand as if she needed the contact to feel complete. "Mara," he said. She looked up. "Marry me." Her eyes went wide. "What?" James shifted off the chair and onto one knee, pulling out the ring he had been carrying in his pocket for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. It was simple, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant and understated because that was Mara. "I love you," he said. "I love your passion and your courage and the way you light up when you talk about books. I love how you made me remember that success is not just about money or power or achievement. It is about being happy, about building a life that matters, about loving someone so much that everything else fades in comparison. You gave me that. You gave me a home, a purpose, a reason to step back from the life I thought I wanted and build the life I actually need. So marry me, Mara. Let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me." Mara was crying, tears streaming down her face, and for a horrible moment James thought she was going to say no. But then she was nodding, laughing through the tears, saying yes over and over as she pulled him up and kissed him and held him like she would never let go. "Yes," she said again. "Yes, I will marry you." He slid the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly, just like everything else about them. They got married in September, exactly 1 year after they met. The ceremony was held in the meadow behind the harvest table, with the mountains as their backdrop and the entire town in attendance. Dorothy cried through the whole thing. Catherine kept whispering that her son had finally found his way. Emma and David gave embarrassing speeches about James's intensity and Mara's ability to handle it. Mara wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. James wore a suit and could not stop smiling. They wrote their own vows, promising to support each other's dreams, to be honest even when it was hard, to never let work or obligation come between them and what mattered most. "You are my home," Mara said, voice shaking with emotion. "Not Maple Falls, not the bookstore, wherever you are, that is where I belong." "You are my everything," James said. "The reason I wake up smiling, the person I want to tell everything to, the love I did not know I was searching for until I found you." They kissed as husband and wife, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The reception lasted until midnight, full of dancing and laughter and joy. James danced with his mother and then with Mara, holding her close and whispering that he loved her, that he could not wait for their life together. They honeymooned in Scotland, 2 weeks of exploring castles and hiking through the Highlands and visiting every bookstore they could find. They brought back a suitcase full of books that barely fit on the plane and even more memories that would last forever. When they returned to Maple Falls, they slipped back into their life with ease. Mara ran the bookstore with James's help. James managed his company from his home office, traveling to Boston once a month, but always coming home to Mara and Scout and the life they had built. In December, Mara told James she was pregnant. They were decorating the Christmas tree, arguing good-naturedly about whether lights should be evenly spaced or randomly scattered, when she just blurted it out. "I am pregnant." James dropped the ornament he was holding. "What?" "I am pregnant, about 8 weeks. I just found out yesterday, and I was going to wait until Christmas morning to tell you, but I cannot keep secrets from you, and I am too excited to wait." James crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "We are having a baby. We are having a baby," Mara confirmed, laughing. James set her down carefully as if she might break. "I cannot believe it. A baby, our baby." "Are you happy? Are you kidding?" "I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." They told their families on Christmas, and Catherine cried happy tears while Emma immediately started planning the baby shower. Mara's parents came to visit, falling in love with Maple Falls and with James, and with the life their daughter had created. The pregnancy was easy, or as easy as pregnancy could be. Mara glowed, according to Dorothy and everyone else in town. James became even more protective, hovering and worrying and generally driving Mara crazy with his concern. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him after he tried to carry her up the porch steps. "I know, I just want to make sure you are okay." "I am okay, the baby is okay, you need to relax." But she loved how much he cared, how invested he was in every doctor's appointment and every milestone. Their daughter was born in July, during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the town. James drove Mara to the hospital 20 miles away, holding her hand and telling her to breathe and probably panicking more than she was. "You are doing great," he kept saying. "You are the one shaking," Mara pointed out between contractions. "I am not good with feeling helpless." "Then stop feeling helpless and just be here with me." He did, staying by her side through the entire labor, wiping her forehead and letting her squeeze his hand until he thought the bones might break. And when their daughter finally arrived, tiny and perfect and screaming her displeasure at the world, James cried. "She is perfect," he whispered, staring at the little face scrunched up in fury. "She is," Mara agreed, exhausted and happy. They named her Charlotte after Mara's grandmother, with the middle name Catherine for James's mother. Charlie, they called her, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's intense eyes. The first few months were chaos, sleepless nights and endless diapers, and learning how to be parents. But they figured it out together, supporting each other through the exhaustion and frustration and overwhelming love. James cut his travel to Boston down to every other month. Mara hired an assistant manager for the bookstore so she could spend more time with Charlie. They adjusted, adapted, and found a new rhythm that included midnight feedings and baby laughter and the indescribable joy of watching their daughter discover the world. Charlie grew, hitting milestones and developing a personality that was equal parts stubborn and sweet. She loved books, of course, sitting in Mara's lap while her mother read to her. She loved her father's voice, falling asleep most easily when James sang old folk songs that his grandmother had taught him. On Charlie's first birthday, they threw a party at the bookstore. The place was packed with friends and family, with locals who had watched their love story unfold. There was cake and presents and laughter, and Mara stood with James watching their daughter smash her face into frosting and thought about how different her life was from what she had imagined. She had thought opening a bookstore would be her greatest achievement, the culmination of her dreams. But it turned out the bookstore was just the beginning, the catalyst that brought James into her life and started a journey she could never have anticipated. Happy. James asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. So happy I could burst, Mara said, leaning back against him. Me too, thank you for this life. Thank you for choosing it, Mara said. For choosing me, for choosing us over everything else you could have had. There was never really a choice, James said. From the moment I walked into your bookstore, I was already choosing you. I just did not know it yet. They stood there, watching their daughter, their friends, their community, and felt the rightness of it settle deep in their bones. This was home. This was family. This was everything that mattered. 2 years later, they had a son, a quiet baby they named Henry, who looked exactly like James and had his father's serious demeanor. Charlie adored him, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bottle feedings, though she was only 3 and her help was more hindrance than assistance. The bookstore continued to thrive, becoming a cornerstone of the community. Mara started a writing group and a summer reading program for kids. She brought in local authors for events and partnered with schools to promote literacy. James helped behind the scenes with strategy and funding, proud of everything she had built. His company continued to grow under Marcus's leadership. James stayed involved at a strategic level but no longer felt consumed by it. He had learned to delegate, to trust, to prioritize what truly mattered. He traveled to Boston for quarterly board meetings but was always home within 2 days, eager to return to his family. They bought a bigger house with space for the kids and a large yard where Scout could run. They hosted dinners and game nights and birthday parties. They took vacations as a family, introducing Charlie and Henry to the ocean, to mountains, to cities and museums and all the beauty the world had to offer. But they always came back to Maple Falls, to the town that had given them each other, to the community that felt like extended family, to the life they had chosen together. On their 10th anniversary, James took Mara back to the lake where they had walked that evening when he first told her he did not want to leave. The kids were with Catherine for the weekend, and it was just the 2 of them, like it had been in the beginning. They walked the same path, holding hands, remembering. Do you ever regret it? Mara asked. Giving up being CEO, moving here, choosing this life over what you had before. James stopped walking and turned to face her. Not for a single second. Everything I gave up was just things, just titles and money and a life that looked successful on paper but felt empty in practice. What I gained was everything that actually matters. You, our kids, a home that feels real, work that fulfills me instead of consuming me. I got to become the man I actually wanted to be instead of the man I thought I should be. I love you, Mara said, the same words she had said countless times, but that never felt less true. I love you too, James said. Thank you for opening that bookstore. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger who walked in looking for peace and found his whole life instead. They kissed as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and Mara thought about that day 10 years ago when she had turned the key in the lock of her bookstore for the first time. She had been searching for possibility, for purpose, for a life that felt meaningful. She had found all that and so much more. She had found home, family, love that transformed everything. She had found James, the serious CEO who learned to smile, who traded power for peace and never looked back. And he had found her, the woman who took a leap of faith and built something beautiful, who showed him that success was not about what you achieved, but about who you became and who you loved along the way. They walked back to the car as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, ready to return to their children, their home, their life. A life that had started with a bookstore and a vacation, and two people brave enough to choose love over everything else. It was not always easy. They had arguments and disagreements and moments of frustration. They dealt with sick kids and business challenges and the normal chaos of life. But through it all, they had each other, a foundation solid enough to weather any storm. Charlie grew into a curious, thoughtful girl who loved reading as much as her mother and had her father's determination. Henry remained quiet but observant, seeing everything and surprising them with insights that seemed beyond his years. They were good kids, happy kids, growing up in a town where everyone knew their names and looked out for them. James coached Henry's soccer team and helped with Charlie's science fair projects. Mara volunteered at the school library and organized fundraisers for new playground equipment. They were present, involved, committed to giving their children the kind of childhood filled with love and stability and possibility. The bookstore celebrated its 15th anniversary with a festival that took over Main Street. There were author signings and poetry readings, and a used book sale that drew people from 3 states. Mara stood at the entrance, greeting customers and friends, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. James stood beside her, their children running around with their friends, and thought about the man he had been 15 years ago. Stressed, lonely, successful by every external measure but hollowed out inside. He had come to Maple Falls looking for a break, for 2 weeks of peace, before returning to his real life. Instead, he had found his real life waiting for him in a bookstore on Main Street, in the form of a woman with dark hair and bright eyes who talked about books like they were sacred, and who saw him not as a CEO or a business success, but just as James. She had changed everything, opened doors he did not know existed, shown him that life could be full and rich and meaningful in ways that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or board meetings or industry recognition. He had extended his stay in Maple Falls indefinitely, and it was the best decision he had ever made. As the sun set on the anniversary festival, as they walked home with tired children and full hearts, James pulled Mara close and kissed the top of her head. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For everything. For this life, for our family, for showing me what really matters." Mara smiled, the same smile that had caught his attention 15 years ago in her bookstore. "You did the hard part. You were brave enough to stay, to change, to build something new. I just gave you a reason." "You are every reason," James said. They reached their house, their home, the place where their love had grown roots deep enough to last forever. The porch light was on, welcoming them back. Scout barked from inside, eager to see them. Through the window, they could see the bookshelves James had built, filled with the stories that had brought them together. Charlie and Henry ran ahead, tired but happy, already talking about the next day's adventures. James and Mara followed more slowly, hands linked, hearts full, grateful beyond measure for the journey that had led them here. It had started with a bookstore and a CEO on vacation, 2 people looking for different things but finding each other instead. It had grown into something neither of them could have predicted, something more beautiful and real and lasting than any story in any book. This was their happily ever after, not an ending but a continuation, a life built on love and choice and the courage to say yes to possibility. And as they walked into their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created together, they knew with absolute certainty that every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been worth it for this. For each other, for their children, for a love that had transformed them both and given them something neither had known they were missing until they found it. This was home, this was family, This was forever. And it all started the day she opened a bookstore in a small town, and a CEO on vacation decided to extend his stay indefinitely, all because of her.